Till now with the foundation, definition, and scope of sociolinguistics. With first the structuralist movement or structuralism before the second half of the 20th century. This actually refers to an approach, and in here we're referring to what? To structuralism, which focuses on language again as a system made of smaller systems, or I would say smaller structures or units at different levels, sound, grammar, meaning, etc. So basically phonetics, phonology, morphology, and syntax. It is often associated with those linguists who are considered as what? As pioneers, and who are particularly interested in describing the form of language. So in here we have names such as de Saussure, Chomsky, and Bloomfield. They actually noticed the existence of variation in speech, but they were inclined to dismiss it as what? As a nuisance getting in the way of good descriptions, and they rather chose to study language as asocial, which means non-social, autonomous, independent, and self-sufficient, regardless of their differences and the existence of what? Of both regional and social variations. And when we talk about variations, we're literally talking about differences within each language. Starting first with regional variations or regional differences. These are basically linguistic differences that exist between speakers from different geographical areas, villages, towns, cities, etc. And it includes differences in accent, vocabulary, morphology, and sentence structure. So again, in here, we can literally see how we are always going back to the linguistic levels proposed by whom? By Ferdinand de Saussure. And we're literally taking the words and analyzing them, okay, according to those systems. So when we say regional variations, we're talking about, again, as we've stated before, geographical areas, right? So if we want to contextualize, if you want to take Algeria as an example, which is literally a very rich country when it comes to differences and variations, especially regional ones, because of its geographical area that is too big. All right, so if we take, for instance, the variations existing in the east and variations existing in the west, okay, they're absolutely different. So if we take into consideration the word qal in Arabic, okay, so the standard form is qal, okay, and if we want to transcribe it, it will be what? It will be qal. All right, good. Now we have, this is at the phonemic level, okay, so in here we're basically transcribing this at the phonemic level. All right, so again we have different realizations or different representations according to the geographical areas. So we have, for instance, al, we have qal, and we have gal. All right, these here have a name, okay, and they are called allophones. All right, and so in here allophones refer to the different realizations of a phoneme. The phoneme here is what? The phoneme here is this qa, right? So we have a, qa, ga, and in some regions we even have ka, right? So when taking this lexeme here and transcribing it phonemically, and taking the phoneme and taking a look at the different allophones or the different realizations, we can in here see the linguistic differences that exist between speakers, let's say from BBA, Algiers, and Tlemcen, for instance. All right? There is also another example, also at the phonemic level. In Tlemcen, they say يقبض. So we have يقبض. All right? Sometimes it's actually يقضب. And as we can see here, yeg in here is the same. However, in here we have what? The phonemes are literally what? They are switched or altered. This exact phenomenon here has also a name, which is the metathesis. Okay? When two phonemes are actually what? Altered. However, the meaning is always the same. Also, if we take a look at the English language as well, we have the word ask. Some Afro-Americans, they pronounce it as axe. And also in here we have what? We have more like a shift in these sounds or in these phonemes. All right? Talking of which, if we consider syntax, which is also another system or subsystem, Afro-Americans, they generally say is you, for instance, instead of are you. All right? And this is here syntactic. So these were some examples, all right, of the different levels of analysis, the different linguistic differences that exist between speakers from different geographical areas. Okay? Now moving to these social variations or these social differences, and these refer to language variation between social groups. How language varies according to, for instance, the social class, gender, age, ethnicity, etc. If we take this social class into consideration, we'll find that, for instance, in Tlemcen, the higher social class generally use L, when the lower social class use GEL. Okay? If we take into account gender between males and females, we'll find also some words that are only used by males and some other words that are used by females. It has also to do with the tone, the pitch, etc. of the speech itself. So in here again, we can see that we are analyzing the phonetic level, all right, or the phonetic, I would say, facet of language. Take into consideration as well, obviously, old people, they do not speak like young people, so we do have differences even with regard to age. Ethnicity, again, the example of the Afro-Americans or the example of the Amazigh in Algeria, where you can actually tell from the pronunciation of the speaker whether he is actually a Kabyle or not. Okay? So again, it was perhaps only in the 1950s that all of these variations that we've been talking about, that they've started being taken seriously. Okay? and that serious investigation began to consider them and the relationship between language and society, and that is with the emergence of variationist sociolinguistics. When we say variationist, we're literally talking about what variations, that is, differences. So they have started taking variations or these differences into consideration. Sociolinguistics, socio obviously referring to the social factors, so they've started incorporating these social factors. Linguistics, obviously, we're always doing what? We're always analyzing language, okay? And so in here we can see that there is a more of a comprehensive approach to language. That is, approaching a language full of systematic variations can only be accounted for by appealing to what? To outside language factors, that is, external factors, external forces and facts that are generally tied to the social and the societal context. This will lead us directly to William Labov. And so whenever you hear variationist sociolinguistics, the first name that you should remember is that of William Labov, all right? So, sociolinguistic work in the tradition inspired by William Labov, which describes patterns and structures of language variation. That is, variationist approaches commonly adopt what? A quantitative methodology. And this is here so important. When we refer to quantitative methodology, we're actually referring to what William Labov did. And that is what? Literally interviewing people, recording them, saving those recordings, analyzing these recordings quantitatively to do what? To correlate between what is heard in the recordings and the external social factors and how these two intermingle, all right? So focusing on the frequency with which linguistic forms, when we say linguistic forms, we're talking here like the different levels, the different systems, that is pronunciation, grammar, etc., occur across speakers, groups of speakers, or even speaking styles. All right? And so in here, we can find terms such as quantitative sociolinguistics, the quantitative paradigm, the Labovian tradition, and empirical linguistics. Okay? Therefore, the assumption became that only by including both the linguistic and the social factors in language analysis can then complex phenomena like code switching is literally switching between two codes and two systems, that is, two dialects, two languages, etc. Borrowing, that is, borrowing a term from another language. Dialects, the variety of a language that includes differences in vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Accents, that only refers to pronunciation, the way words are spoken, and the variations with regard to this latter. Style switching, that is, switching the style according to the situation, according to the context. And diglossia, which is a well-known phenomenon present here in Algeria, where we have both a high and a low variety. All right, we'll be always tackling these in future videos in details, but this is more like an overview of the different phenomena that can only be accounted for by appealing to, again, external factors, social factors. All right, so this is regarding variation in sociolinguistics. Now moving to something else, which has to do with the communicative competence for language use and language analysis. In here, let's start first with Noam Chomsky, all right, the 1957. According to Chomsky, there is what? There is what is called the linguistic competence, competence versus performance, all right? So according to Chomsky, linguistic competence refers to the ideal internal system of rules, generally grammar. So, according to him, this system is sufficient, right? And it's, based on which language is used and should be analyzed, which ignores completely how language is actually used in social and pragmatic contexts, which means, again, it is always ignoring performance, which is the actual use of language in concrete situations. All right? As a response to this, Delheims proposed a constructive critique to Chomsky's concept of linguistic competence. All right? So Delheims again proposed a methodological approach to study the ways of speaking evident in speech communities. All right? And he called it the ethnography of speaking or the ethnography of communication. Now we're looking at this word ethnography. Ethnos refers to people or nations, graphy from graphia, writing. So it literally means writing about people or writing about cultures, that is, depicting the communication. All right? So it is a qualitative approach that studies language as a cultural practice within its social context. And the word context here is just so important. All right? He also proposed a framework known as the speech community model. A speech community is defined by what? By shared language use and speaking norms, all right? And sociocultural understanding that are not strictly by national or geographical borders, all right? Which means if we take into account Arabic or if we take into account English, then we can say British and American English. Obviously, they don't have or they do not actually exist in the same place, but we do have borders in between. However, we're not taking these borders into account when referring to a certain speech community, okay? All right, by incorporating the prevalent study at the time, which was pragmatics, that is the study of beyond what is said, we have, many things to consider in pragmatics that has to do with the context, with the interlocutor, with the meaning that is implied, that is not said, with regard to politeness, etc. So we have what? We have many layers in pragmatics. Along with the philosophy of language, he introduced his theory of communicative competence. So, according to him, linguistic competence alone is not enough. All right, people who have this idealized, this internalized system of rules or of grammar, however, they are not able to communicate because the linguistic competence, according to Himes, is not enough on its own. It's not sufficient. All right. And so again, he proposed what is called the communicative competence, which refers to what a speaker needs to know and what a child needs to learn to be able to use language appropriately in specific social or cultural settings. All right? According to him, communication requires three competencies: linguistic competence, pragmatic competence, and sociolinguistic competence. All of these are reinforced by a strategic competence for successful language compensation and manipulation. So we see here that he kept the linguistic competence previously proposed by whom? By Chomsky, right? However, he added the pragmatic and the sociolinguistic competencies plus the strategic competence. All right, for what? For a good communication. Perfect. So according to Delheims, for an individual to be a competent language user, this necessitates the mastery of both form and function. When we say form, we're referring to language. When we say function, we're referring to the pragmatic, sociolinguistic, strategic competencies. All right? This mastery encompasses a diverse array of pragmatic abilities encircled by sociolinguistic knowledge, again, which we've just explained. So, Haim's communicative competence has not only shed light on language use in social contexts, but also has further contributed to a shift in linguistics, marked by a social and a cultural approach to language study. So, again, in here, he was doing what? He was forging for the foundation of sociolinguistics as a distinct field on its own right within linguistics, while supplementing and solidifying prior works on language variation. You see? So this is basically the link, all right, to sociolinguistics. Perfect. Again, in here, again, when we say here pragmatic abilities, we're always referring maybe to the stylistic shift, to the politeness norms, to beyond what is said, to etc etc. So again, we have like a plethora of layers to consider when we talk about the pragmatic ability. All right, so finally, this is more like of a diagram to simplify everything again. So we have two sides, right? We have the side of sociolinguistics starting from structuralism, and we have the side of generative linguistics coming to the communicative competence by Delheims. Okay, let's start with structuralism, modern linguistics, right? Ferdinand de Saussure again. Language as a system of subsystems, that is, phonology, morphology, syntax, etc. They have considered language as asocial, autonomous, and self sufficient, which means that they have ignored regional variations and also social variations. All right. That led to the existence of variationist sociolinguistics. And again, whenever we hear variationist sociolinguistics, we always think of whom? We think of William Labov, where he actually integrated the social factors along with the linguistic factors when analyzing language or when describing language. All right, so I hope this part is clear. So we start with structuralism, modern linguistics. When we say structuralism, we're always referring again to Ferdinand de Saussure, language as a system of subsystems, a social autonomous self-sufficient, ignoring regional and social variations. All right, which led to the emergence of variationist sociolinguistics with whom? With William Labov, not Pavlov, not Shakespeare, all right? So William Labov, who took into consideration both linguistic and social factors. All right? Now, we also have generative linguistics with whom? With Noam Chomsky, all right? Who considered the linguistic competence as the ideal internal system of rules. And so he obviously ignored the social and pragmatic contexts. This led to Delheim's critique of Chomsky's linguistic competence and also the emergence of the ethnography of communication, taking into account both the social and cultural contexts, leading later on to the communicative competence, all right, that includes the linguistic competence as previously proposed by Chomsky, along with the sociolinguistic and the pragmatic competencies. So also in here, we can actually see the shift from linguistic competence to communicative competence. All right, so from linguistic competence to communicative competence. And we can see that the linguistic competence is only a part, all right, one single competence in the communicative competence. All right, I hope this is clear. Thank you so much for your attention and see you next time.